The Totally Legend of Brandon Thighmaster, An Authors and Dragons Tale. Written by Steve Wetherill. Narrated by Wally Schrass. Across the Iron Plains and above the Bowood Forest stood the Trapezius Mountains, bulbous and huge. Local legend says that the earth was once flat, until one day it began flexing, becoming the craggy, rugged, and sexually attractive earth we know today. At the peak of the eastern trapezius, some would argue the more pronounced of the two, there lay a temple, carved into the stone aeons since, its pillars and balconies thrust into the sky with suggestive confidence, the stonework smooth and undulating. The only adornment hung above the heavy wooden gates that served as the temple's only entrance. It was a large brass relief of 4 vertical strips, and 1 shorter horizontal strip, positioned within a circle the imprint of the Temple of the Many Fists. On the various levels of the temple, throngs of human bodies engaged in a particular exercise, some in complicated calisthenics, some training with weights, some merely flexing and checking their form in front of the various reflecting pools. At the very top of the temple was a plateau of plain white flagstones, and at the center, one monk stood alone, but for his master. The master was the abbot, and though he was ancient in years, he was still very much ripped. His leathery old skin stretched taut and across defined musculature, and though his eyes were rheumy and his teeth crooked, his eyebrow and mustache game were astonishingly on fleek. He stared at his student with weariness in his heart. This was a talk he had been meaning to have for some time. The student stood holding the ready position of the way of the totally fighting, his limbs stretched elegantly, every muscle taut and rigid as steel cable.
"Brandon-san,"
the abbot croaked.
"Show me Casual Tiger owns opposition."
The student, Brandon, sprung into action, leaning back as though reclining in an invisible chair, while his arms waved in a series of quick slashes.
"Now, show me Suggestive Snake comes at bro."
Brandon shifted form instantly, languidly rising from their recline as his bent fist weaved fluidly before him.
"Soaring Eagle renounces Beta Cock."
The form changed again, Brandon's arms flowing down gracefully at his sides while his legs snapped a precise front kick before him. He landed perfectly, as still and taut as a lion taking a dump. The abbot grunted. The form was unquestionably precise, but still, he was troubled.
"Brandon-san, what does it mean to be a monk?"
The student did not hesitate. "To seek perfection, so that we may be at one with the universe."
"And how is perfection achieved?"
"Rigorous physical discipline, absolution of form, purity of mind."
"And?"
Brandon frowned. "Being great?" The abbot shook his head. "Super great?"
"Brandon-san, it is for this reason I have asked you here today. We must talk."
Brandon relaxed from his ready position. "If I'd known we would have been talking, I'd have warmed up my talking muscles." The abbot gestured for Brandon to kneel beside him.
"That is what we must talk about. This is not a conversation about your muscles."
Brandon sighed. "That is a damned shame, Master, if you don't mind me saying so."
"Do not get me wrong, Brandon-san. Your muscles are worthy of deep and serious discussion. Indeed, of all the acolytes of the Temple of the Many Fists, you are by far the most super buff."
"Thanks. I've been working out," said Brandon modestly. "For as long as I can remember, constantly."
"As you should, young acolyte. But you must remember that physical musculature, while important, is not everything."
Brandon jerked suddenly.
"What was that?"
asked the abbot. "I do not know, Master. I had this sudden and inexplicable urge to slap you in the face. I must have briefly entertained a demon." The abbot sighed.
"You know, when your parents left you here, we promised to raise you as we would any other monk. And we have. Your form, your physical discipline, it is more than we could hope from any student. But,
Yes?
I worry about your soul, Brandon-san. I worry that your spiritual fortitude has stagnated beneath the weight of your admittedly glorious physical form.
Brandon blinked. I don't worry about that at all.
I know, but you must if you want to achieve true perfection. You already have buffness of the body. You must now strive for buffness of the soul.
Then how, Master? How do I make my soul as totally ripped as my body?
You must seek reflection of the self.
You mean, like, with mirrors? The abbot sighed again.
No, I mean inner contemplation. Meditate with me, Brandon-san.
The abbot closed his eyes.
Seek your mind. Relax into the quiet dark of your mind. Find the inner truth of your soul. Journey to the...
The abbot opened one eye.
Brandon, are you doing push-ups?
Brandon looked up sheepishly from his push-ups. Yeah, sorry. I didn't notice. The abbot shook his head slowly and rose to his feet.
Brandon-san, you have never left the confines of this temple. Is that correct?
Why would I, Master? I have everything I need right here. Killer weight room, plentiful protein, lots of reflecting pools.
The world beyond our walls is large beyond measure, young acolyte, and there is much to be learned and experienced. The other masters and I have been talking, and we agree that it is time for you to go out into the world. You will become a journeyman and pilgrimage beyond the sight of the Trapezius Mountains.
Brandon gazed out over the horizons. Are you sure, Master? I mean, the world looks so small from here. I mean, look at those distant trees. Weak, pathetic.
Things become smaller the further you are away from them.
Ha! Very wise. You're saying that in order to appreciate something, I must be close to it.
No, that wasn't a metaphor, Brandon-san. That was just basic science. I worry that we may have overlooked a few things in your early education.
Brandon nodded. Interesting.
Brandon-san?
I'm thinking, Master, that you have not asked the other acolytes to go out into the world. Why just me? The abbot walked over to the balcony's edge and gestured at the variously exercising, uniformly shirtless masses below.
Tell me, Brandon-san, what do you see?
Brandon looked over the sea of writhing flesh. My brothers and sisters of the temple.
Yes, all the disciplines out in stunning display. Over there, the delt blasters and the ab crunchers, and over there, glute rangers, squatting endlessly. See how in harmony they are? Many disciplines, one path.
The abbot turned and put a hand on Brandon's shoulder.
Of all the acolytes in all the disciplines, you, Brandon of the Thighmasters, show the most promise of all. But you are incomplete. We see something special within you, Brandon Thighmaster. But we feel that the safety and sanctity of these walls has stunted your spiritual growth. You must go out into the world and find your destiny, and return to us ready to take your place among the masters.
Brandon nodded. That's radical.
It is indeed very radical.
But also, please take your hand from my shoulder, Master. It makes me uncomfortable. The abbot removed his hand.
Ah, yes, your vow of celibacy. You realize you don't have to be so stringent, yes?
It just feels appropriate, Master. The abbot nodded.
Perhaps this too is part of your spiritual development. The world may challenge some of your preconceptions.
I'm sure there is nothing in the world I cannot handle, Master. I am, after all, Brandon Thighmaster.
You are indeed my pupil. You are indeed.
The abbot waited by the heavy gates. Several of the other masters gathered around him. A light snow drifted in the sky, and the air was crisp and invigorating. Above them, the brass fist symbol of the temple glinted in the morning sunshine.
It is a good day to go out into the world,
said the abbot to no one in particular.
It is enough to make a man pine for his youth.
The master of chest expanders gestured towards the temple's grand central staircase where a figure approached.
And speaking of youth, my friend,
the master of glute ranger squinted.
What in the universe's name is he wearing? Is he wearing nothing? That seems a little forward considering his vows. No, wait. It is not nothing. There is definitely some material.
From a distance, little could be seen of Brandon's clothing but his traveling pack, waterskin, and sandals. But as he came closer, it seemed he was only just wearing a pair of incredibly small leather undershorts. Masters, he nodded at each in turn. At the Temple of the Many Fists, various states of shirtlessness was expected. But even with their combined worldly experience, there was something about Brandon's attire that seemed indecent, almost as if being entirely naked would have been less revealing, somehow.
Brandon-son, said the abbot, your clothes.
Brandon looked down. Oh, yes. Travel light, move fast. Am I right? He beamed.
I'm not sure right is the word I'm looking for here.
Wrong, said the master of glute rangers.
So very, very wrong.
Brandon continued oblivious. I made it from an old pair of sandals. I'm calling it a thong, as that is essentially what it is.
But where are your genitals?
Oh, I found that with a little bit of effort, I can tuck the whole shebang right up inside.
Please desist immediately, said the abbot. You have at least packed plenty of water?
He gestured to Brandon's waterskin. Water? Oh, no. This is filled entirely with body oil. The abbot blinked.
Okay. And food?
Brandon gestured to his laden backpack. Nothing but protein, he grinned. The masters exchanged glances while the abbot cleared his throat.
Brandon-son, you are a special child. You will be greatly missed.
Oh, totally, said Brandon. Absolutely.
And now, you must go out into the world.
Cool, said Brandon. Cool, cool, cool.
The wooden gates opened with a loud and ominous creak.
The snowy rocks of the Trapezium Mountains waiting just outside. Welp, said Brandon. See ya. And with that, he strode confidently into the wilds. The masters watched him go.
He is unique, certainly. Perhaps our interpretation of the scrolls is correct, and he is indeed the chosen one. Destined to usher in a new age of enlightenment. Perhaps, said the abbot. I hope so. The alternative is that we have just sent an idiot to his death.
Brandon had been traveling for 3 days. Gone were the challenging mountain rocks and the cool, thin air. Now he trudged through the bowwood forests, where the atmosphere was heavier and the sun hidden behind the tall, waving trees. The trees, now that he saw them up close, did not seem so pathetic. After a few attempts at knocking them down, he discovered they were strong, like stone, yet moved gracefully in the wind. All this without any visible musculature. Brandon remained quietly suspicious of the trees, and begrudgingly walked in their shadow. He headed steadily downwards, with no particular direction in mind, confident that the universe would guide him on his way. So far, it had taken him into several hidden ditches and pitfalls, but Brandon saw these as a blessing. Climbing was excellent cardio, and really worked the forearms, and suddenly falling was a great test of his reaction times. As the sun began to set on the third day, Brandon sat upon a rocky outcrop atop a shallow cliff edge and stared over the heads of the trees to the horizon beyond. The sky turned first purple and then black as the sun set behind him, and the stars blossomed into brilliance. 1,000,000 lights, each as bright as the other, standing out against the dark with quiet glory. Brandon contemplated the majesty of the void before him, and for the first time in his life was distracted utterly by a beauty beyond his own. "Universe," he said out loud, "I'm gonna get in you." Pretty Brightblade was pretty fucked, she surmised. Tied by her feet from a tree branch, perilously close to a campfire, she waited for the 3 orcs to decide what to do with her. She was quietly thankful that they were so slow in coming to an agreement, as the options so far were all equally grisly.
"Maybe we have some fun with her,"
said one.
"Oh, Grank, you disgusting. She look like otter."
"You never have fun with otter before?"
"No. Drac draw line at semi-aquatic weasels."
"Drac's standards seem pretty fucking arbitrary from Gronk's point of view. Ben'll say we eat her face. Ben'll say that about all the girls. Ben'll is consistent in his message. Ben'll is friend you can rely on."
Pretty slowly tried to swing herself from side to side, her short black hair floating softly around her head. She hoped she could loosen the rope at her ankles, but she didn't have a plan much beyond that. If she were the kind of person who could take on 3 orcs by herself, she wouldn't have been captured by 3 orcs. Still, while her meager weaponry was placed beyond her reach, she had a dagger hidden in her boot. If she was quick enough, she could maybe take down one of them before the others ground her into the mud.
"Gronk is sinking only with little Gronk. Has no respect for desires of friends."
Gronk submit that Bentel can eat face after Gronk is done with it.
Ben'll submit that Gronk keep his dick far away from Bentel's food.
Drac submit that both Gronk and Bentel whine like tiny bitches. Allow Gronk to submit some speculation on Drac's parentage.
Pretty was at least thankful there were only 3. They must have been a hunting and trapping party. Had they been a scouting party, that would mean her companions would probably be discovered. Even if she did escape, she wasn't looking forward to facing her companions. She had told them she was an expert rogue. What kind of expert rogue gets jumped by orcs? Creatures with all the stealth and subtlety of a pig wiping its ass on another pig. She looked at the orcs, arguing at each other through their tusked and heavy jaws, their simian eyes screwed up with the perpetual effort of thinking and talking at the same time. While they weren't dressed for war, they were still orcs. Heavy hide armor and a battle axe was practically nude as far as they were concerned. Pretty hoped that her companions had noticed her disappearance and were looking for her. Maybe if you hadn't told them all you were such an unflappable badass, you might be.
"Then it is agreed,"
roared the one called Drac.
"The human will be divided into 3 parts. 1 part for Bentel to eat, 1 part for Gronk to hump, and the 3rd part for me to wear as humorous hat." "Agreed." "But who gets which part?"
"Oh, for shit's sake, Bentel. Why you have to be so picky?"
Pretty cleared her throat. "Listen, fellas," she said. "I think it's only fair to warn you that I have, super gonorrhea. Drac frowned.
What is gonorrhea?
It's a very bad human disease. You get it from toilet seats. Bentel snorted.
Bah! Human venereal diseases are merely seasoning to orc palate.
Damn, said Pretty. Then perhaps I can appeal to your sense of fair play. Gronk frowned.
Foreplay?
Gods, no. I mean, 3 big fellas like you against 1 little old human doesn't seem very honorable. Dronk laughed.
Tell me, human, when you snap the neck of chicken for broth, do you worry about honor?
Well, no, I suppose not.
Choking chicken is natural act, is not matter of honor. You are philosophically inadequate. Now come, brothers, let us tear this human into shareable chunks.
There came a sudden and piercing whistle. The 3 orcs froze and then turned slowly. Pretty squinted at the figure approaching, not quite believing what she saw.
Why is human whistle?
Asked Gronk.
Is it human?
Asked Drac.
It look like golem made of ham. What are you, ham golem? Speak!
The figure spoke. My name is Brandon Thighmaster of the Temple of the Many Fists, and I am going to ask you once nicely to let that woman go free. The 3 orcs erupted into laughter.
Naked human has inadequate brain. Believes his nudity is threatening.
Pretty rolled her eyes. Whoever this mostly naked stranger was, he was clearly insane. Now, if she were a real rogue, she'd use his drawn-out annihilation as an opportunity to wriggle free and make a run for it. However, her mouth betrayed her before her brain could catch it. Get out of here, mister. It's too late for me. I'm not going anywhere, said Brandon. He pointed at Gronk. Except upside this bitch's head.
Gronk no understand human threat, but Gronk nevertheless enraged.
The orc charged at the newcomer, who elegantly sidestepped and chopped the orc in the small of his back. Gronk stumbled face first into a tree with a loud crunch. He fell to his knees, cradling his face.
Ah! Gronk hurt face on tree. Human is asshole.
Now, I'm not going to tell you fellas again, said Brandon, sliding into a ready position. I will absolutely fist you. The 2 standing orcs froze.
Real what?
You heard. The 2 orcs exchanged a brief and whispered conversation, and then turned as one and ran into the brush.
Wait for Gronk!
Gronk followed, his nose streaming snot and blood into his cupped hands.
No one leave Gronk alone with rapist!
Pretty watched the events with an almost dreamlike sense of detachment, and it was at that point that her swinging paid off and her feet came loose. She hit the ground lightly and rolled to her feet. Her eyes didn't leave the stranger. Did you... She swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. Did you just threaten to fist an orc? Brandon smiled broadly. Absolutely, he said. No one likes a good fisting. He mimed a few quick jabs and a left hook. Pretty felt herself relax a little. Oh. You mean like punching? Brandon frowned. Yeah, of course. What else could I mean? Pretty straightened up and dusted herself off. Okay, you worried them off, and I'm very grateful. Where are the others? Brandon shrugged. Others? You're out here alone? Yup. In the Bowood Forest? Yup. Where the Orc Bandit Legion lives? Apparently. Pretty put her fingers to the bridge of her nose. Look. Brandon, is it? Brandon Thighmaster. You've probably heard of me. Why would I have heard of you? Brandon shrugged again. I just assumed you would have. Pretty picked up her discarded belongings, strapping a short sword to her side and a horsebow to her back. Okay, listen to me, Brandon. My name is Pretty Brightblade, and I'm a rogue. I'm traveling with some companions, and I can get you out of here. But once I do that, you're on your own, 'kay? We're even. Sure, said Brandon. I wasn't heading in a particular direction anyway. The universe is my compass. Well, pardon me for sounding like a bitch, but the universe doesn't know its taint from its tickler. You're better off with me for now. Brandon frowned. Weren't you just captured by monsters? Pretty felt her cheeks flush. I appreciate your help and all, mister, but I'm a fucking rogue, okay? I would have handled that myself. Cool, said Brandon. Then lead on, I guess. Right, Pretty nodded. The first direction we head in is away from those orcs. Pretty led the way through the undergrowth. The meeting place with her companions was not so far away, but she could not risk the orcs backtracking and following them to the hideaway, so she took a wide and convoluted path. She was pleased to see that the muscular stranger, Legmaster, or whatever he said his name was adept at moving quietly. Once she had explained to him to move only where she moved, he followed her like a shadow. A weird, naked shadow. They had been moving for a good few hours now, and she felt it safe to slow the pace and relax a little. So, she said eventually, why are you naked? Naked? What kind of monk do you take me for? I'm not naked. Okay then. Why are you mostly naked? Oh, well, when practicing the art of totally fighting, it's useful to remain as mobile as possible. Also, have you seen these abs? I'm not sure either of us could sleep at night knowing we covered them up. Abs? Are those them things on your stomach? Yeah. Don't you have any? Like that? Gods, no. They look uncomfortable, like you've got a belly full of bricks. Yeah, said Brandon, looking at his abs. Totally. They emerged from the tree line into a meadow of high grass. We're just over the other side of this glade, said Pretty. Orcs aren't the only thing we have to worry about, so move quietly and stay behind me. Sure. They crept forward together, the grass bending softly before them. Suddenly, Pretty froze. There in front of her stood a magnificent doe, grazing quietly and completely oblivious to the presence of the rogue and the monk. Pretty stood silently and gestured behind her for Brandon to remain quiet. She felt carefully for her bow. A doe like that would be meat for a week for Pretty and her companions, but still something stayed her hand. Perhaps just the raw majesty of nature's "Eat knuckles, horned beast!" The doe had time to register a brief look of alarm before Brandon Thighmaster erupted from the grass and punched it square in the face. The doe staggered and bleated, and then sprinted away in a zigzagging panic. Pretty gaped for a while, looking back and forth between the retreating doe and the smiling monk. What the shit is your problem, you maniac? What? You just punched a deer in the face. Who does that? At the temple, we believe in understanding through combat. In order to truly know something, you must fight it. What? Well, if I'm to go out into the world, then how else to understand nature than to punching animals in the fucking face? Exactly! Wait, you've just been wandering around punching? How many... What? How many animals have you punched? Brandon frowned. Well, let me see. It's only been a couple of days. There was the winged beast, the crawling beast, the beast with many legs, the beast with no legs. You know, it would probably help if I wrote all this down. And they teach you this up at the temple, do they? Yeah, sort of. Mental. You are fucking mental. Brandon shrugged. If it's any consolation, I feel much closer to nature now. It really isn't. Now, can I rely on you following me the rest of the way without cold-cocking the wildlife? Brandon hissed air between his teeth. That really does depend on whether it's a new kind of animal I haven't punched yet. Just follow me, okay? By the dueling gods, you are a strange and terrible man. Buff, though. Very buff. Yes, damn it. Almost blindingly so. Pretty stalked off through the long grass, Brandon close at her heels. The hunting lodge had long been abandoned. The logs of its walls were thick with moss, and its doors and shutters hung loosely on their hinges. This is it, said Pretty. This is where the others are. This is where you all live? Said Brandon. Of course not, idiot. This is where hunters used to stop over when humans were still able to move freely in the area. Used to? You really don't know anything, do you? I know lots of things. Look, check this out. Brandon suddenly sprang onto his hands, parted his legs, and rotated his body like a spinning top before flipping back onto his feet. See? I mean, you don't know anything useful. Well, that depends on your definition of useful. Exactly. You didn't wonder why there were orcs in this forest, hundreds of miles from their home? Nah. You've never heard of the Bandit Legion? How they fled to these forests after their brutal defeat in the border wars? Nope. Do you even care? Oh, sure. I mean, well, not really, no. Pretty sighed. My companions and I, we were hired by a nearby village to intercept Orcan raiding parties. That sounds very interesting. The kingdom forces rarely come out this far, so the locals have resorted to hiring mercenaries to... Are you even listening? Honestly? No. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Pretty looked into Brandon's smiling face, as devoid of guile as it was of even the slightest blemish. Just follow me, you hairless muscle clown. Pretty approached the door and knocked 3 times slowly, and then another 4 in quick succession. The door opened slowly and they went inside. The hunting lodge was completely empty but for a stone fireplace and 2 half-elven archers sighting their bows at the door. Equally thin, with short, bouffant hair, the androgynous half-elves were either brothers or sisters, or some combination of both. Relax, you two, it's just me, said Pretty.
Who's the beefcake?
Said the dark-haired half-elf. Danya, this is Brandon. You guys can lower your bows, he's cool. The blonde-haired half-elf, Tanya, cracked a lazy half-smile. I'd say he looks hot, if you get my meaning. Brandon smiled broadly. I absolutely do not, but thanks anyway. Pretty gestured to the half-elves. Brandon, this is Danya and Tanya, their brother and sister. Twins? Said Brandon.
No,
said Danya.
Why? Do all half-elves look the same to you?
I wouldn't know. You're the first I've seen. Relax, Brandon, they're taking the piss, said Pretty. They are twins. Tanya is Danya's identical sister. Must be nice, said Brandon. Like living with a mirror. The twins exchanged glances and each raised an identically cynical eyebrow. Yeah, like that, said Brandon. Awesome. Danya shook his head and turned to Pretty.
What took you so long out there?
Never mind that. Where are the others? Tanya raised her fingers to her mouth and let loose a short whistle. A back door of the hunting lodge swung open and 3 humans entered. One of them was a head taller than the others, clad in scuffed hide armor. He peered out at the world from dirty blonde braids and a beard like a cat that had been frozen mid-explosion. The shortest was dressed in gaudy purple finery and wore a pencil mustache that would have made mothers hold their children a little closer. He wielded a lute that he nervously plucked at. The third member was stocky in build, dressed in mismatched and dented armor. Clean-shaven of face and head, his serious expression softened slightly when he noticed Pretty and Brandon. Brandon, Pretty began, may I introduce you to Gunnar, Mason, and... Pretty rolled her eyes in advance. Helger the Electrifying. The purple-clad one played a jaunty riff on his lute before bowing deeply and flamboyantly. The other 2 rolled their eyes as Pretty had done. The man in the armor stepped forward.
May I ask what this human is doing with you?
Mason, this is Brandon, and yes, I think he's human. He was of some assistance to me, so I've promised him safe passage out of the forest.
Some assistance?
Brandon grinned broadly. I saved her from some orcs. Pretty put her fingers to the bridge of her nose. Let me do the talking, meat man.
You were captured?
Danya spat on the ground in an ugly act of distaste.
I told you the ways of a city rogue are no use out here in the wilds. You should leave the scouting to Tanya and me.
Pretty whirled on him with a pointed finger. And I told you I could handle myself. It was just bad luck is all. Could have happened to any one of us. The big man in the hide armor gave a laugh.
Didn't, though. Did it, short ass? It happened to you.
Pretty whirled the finger around like it was a loaded crossbow. So help me, I will stab you in the dick, Gunner. Gunner laughed again. Mason stepped forward.
Look, let's break this down, okay? You were captured by orcs.
Pretty sighed. Yes.
And you were rescued by this ethereally attractive human.
Yes.
And what of the orcs?
They ran away.
Ran away?
Pretty sighed again. From him, he's some kind of monk. Mason frowned at Brandon.
You scared off 3 orcs?
Brandon scratched at the top of his head while he gazed out of the window. Sorry, what? He said.
You let the orcs live?
Danya snapped.
How do we know they didn't follow you here?
Pretty snarled. For the last time, I'm a rogue. A damned good one. Nobody followed us.
Yes, so you say. But damned good rogues don't get ambushed by orcs. Orcs, for God's sake.
Just everybody relax, okay? We're fine. Everything's fine. Elgar, why don't you play us something relaxing? The purple-clad man huffed through his creepy mustache.
I'm not here to entertain you.
You're a fucking bard. That is literally all you are for. Mason held up his gauntleted hands.
Pretty's right. We should all calm down. Now, to the matter at hand. What are we going to do with Studley here?
He gestured to Brandon. I told you, said Pretty. I promised him safe passage.
Oh, sure, yeah. But maybe we're not thinking this through.
The guy scared off 3 orcs.
Wait a minute,
Gunner spoke, his slab-like brow furrowing.
You're a monk, right?
Brandon nodded.
From up on the mountain.
Yeah, that's right.
Holy shit. I've heard of those guys. They do nothing but fight. That's all they do.
Mason nodded.
Exactly my point. Maybe an extremely attractive man who scares the shit out of orcs might be useful to a group of mercenaries who are getting paid to take out orcs.
Danya shook his head.
We have a system. We should stick to it. Bringing in an unknown element now could be disastrous.
On the other hand, another fighter in the group wouldn't be a bad thing, said Tanya. Elgar cleared his throat.
I think I see what this is about.
Elgar.
No. Let's get it out there. It's because I'm a bard, isn't it?
Gunner scratched the back of his neck in obvious discomfort. Elgar sighed.
Guys, you knew what I brought to the table when we made the arrangement, and now you want to replace me with some oily man whore?
Monk, actually.
Some oily monk whore? I thought we were in this together.
Mason scuffed his ironclad boot on the floor.
Elgar, you didn't even bring a sword with you. Not even a fucking dagger. Because I'm a bard,
wailed Elgar.
I'm here to inspire you. Don't I inspire you?
There was some uncomfortable muttering from the group. Gunner spoke up.
Thing is, though, Elgar, mate, I'd be a lot more inspired if I thought you could last more than 5 seconds in a fight.
Elgar stomped his purple boot on the floor.
Well, if you people don't appreciate my talent, I'll find someone who will.
Elgar stormed to the door, turned around, and shouted,
Enjoy your hairless slut!
Before striding out into the woods. There was a period of embarrassed silence.
Did he just flounce out into the forest?
Murmured Tanya.
Yep. The orc-filled forest?
Yep.
Oh, he is so dead.
Should we go after him? There was another period of embarrassed silence. No.
Okay.
Mason clapped his hands together. I vote the new guy in.
Hey, Wade, are we a democracy now?
Danya snapped.
We had a contract with the villagers and this guy's name isn't on it.
He can take Elgar's share.
What if Elgar wants it?
I don't perceive a future where Elgar is still alive to claim his share. I know that sounds heartless, but I think we should be reasonable.
Okay, guys. Pretty clapped her hands rapidly. If we're going to discuss this, maybe we shouldn't do it in front of our guest.
She gestured to Brandon, who smiled and waved. Okay, said Mason. Let's huddle. The group huddled into each other and began quickly muttering, occasionally throwing a furtive or suspicious glance Brandon's way. Scared the shit out of 3 orcs.
Kind of weird he's completely hairless.
Don't know what his experience is.
Damn, those abs, though.
Elgar sucked anyway.
Saved my life. We owe him a chance. I mean, other than his eyebrows, completely devoid of hair.
Yeah, but dem abs.
The group, reaching a decision, disengaged from the huddle. Pretty smiled.
Mr. Cockmaster? Thighmaster? Whatever. My friends and I have a proposition for you.
Brandon held up his hands.
Before you guys go any further, I should tell you guys I observe a strict vow of celibacy. So, you can look, but you can't touch.
Mason threw his arms out. Ah, shit. Seriously?
Sorry.
You dress like that and you have a vow of celibacy? That's some passive-aggressive shit, buddy. Brandon sniffed.
I don't do anything passively.
Ah, shit.
Can we focus here, guys? Said Tanya. The proposition? Right, said Pretty. We have an arrangement with a nearby village to, dissuade the orcs from raiding them. Arrangement? We get paid. You get paid? To fight? Yeah.
Brandon grinned.
Ha! What a world! So we were wondering, Tanya continued, if you'd like to join up with us. We'd pay you Elgar's share, of course.
Yeah, okay.
Tanya and Danya exchanged a glance. What, just like that?
Yeah, sure.
You don't even want to know, say, what our backgrounds are?
Brandon blinked.
Should I? Probably. I mean, it's common sense. Do you always just jump into contracts with mercenaries without thinking it over? Not always. Well, this is my first. Am I doing this right?
Pretty flapped her hands impatiently.
Let me get the introductions over with. Danya and Tanya here are full-time rangers. They don't have a lot of military experience, but they've worked in the royal forests. They're a dab hand when it comes to tracking poachers and such. Orcs are easier, said Tanya. Stupider, Danya agreed. Pretty gestured to Gunnar. This guy has maybe the most experience of all of us. Mercenary experience, at least. He's been in more than a few militias, and he's killed a dozen orcs.
Well, they were half orcs, said Gunnar modestly. But I figure that rounds up to about 6 full orcs, probably.
Finally, this is Mason, our cleric. Cleric? Said Brandon. Like for taking notes and filing and such?
Mason shook his head. No, you're thinking of a clerk. He fished a holy symbol out from under his armor. 3 linked palms carved into a wooden triangle. I serve a Lenthia. Gunnar burst out laughing.
Ha 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 ha. I'll just bet he would. Get it? Serve a Lenthia. Ha ha.
Mason rolled his eyes. You'll have to excuse Gunnar here. He's the least sophisticated Northman I've ever met. He seems to find my sexuality an endless source of hilarity.
Serve a length? Like sucking your cock?
Ha ha. Mason sighed. Alenthia is the goddess of fortunate meetings. So, yeah. The cocksucking thing is totally on the table, though. Should you change your mind about that celibacy deal?
Noted,
said Brandon politely.
And that just leaves you, Pretty, Danya prompted. I'm a rogue, said Pretty. Yes, said Brandon. Yeah, breaking in, sneaking around, that sort of thing. Sounds vague.
Pretty blushed.
Well, why don't you tell us about your experience, hot shit? How many days a week do you spend waxing your bikini line?
Brandon frowned.
Oh, I was born without body hair.
There was an embarrassed silence.
I think we all were.
Really? Said Brandon.
So you just sort of grew it? Later on? That's, normally how it works. Weird. I think we're getting off track again, guys, said Tanya. Yeah, Danya said. Tell us about your relevant experience, like how many fights have you been in? Brandon shrugged. Many thousands? Danya frowned. I mean, outside of the temple. Oh, well, one, I guess. Wait, do you count animals? Do I count? Pretty held up a hand. Focus, Danya. Think about it. We've been out here 3 weeks and we haven't so much as had a scuffle. This asshole comes down from his temple and literally the first thing he does is beat the shit out of an orc. I think we can safely say we have our fighter. Brandon, welcome to the Better Than Average 6.
Brandon frowned. What? That's what we're called. Mason shrugged unapologetically.
It sounds a little underwhelming. That was kind of the point, said Pretty. The villagers don't have a lot of money, so we didn't want to oversell ourselves. You know, put them off. So, are you in?
The 5 remaining members of the Better Than Average 6 stood in a circle and put their hands in the center. They looked at Brandon expectantly.
Are you in?
Pretty said again.
Oh, yes, I'm totally in. I'm just not touching your hands is all.
Ah, shit. At that moment, Elgar the Electrifying's head crashed through the hunting lodge window and rolled to a stop in the middle of the floor.